Just leave him there, the snow's getting worse. A driver shouted over the radio, but Jack refused. He stepped out of his truck, trudged through the snow, and pulled the stranger into his cabin, away from the biting wind. The next morning, the whole neighborhood stood stunned as Navy Jeeps lined up in front of his house, and a man in uniform stepped out. Type, unfair if you've ever seen goodness mocked, until the truth emerged.
Welcome to QH.
Let's uncover what really happened. Jack Ellison, 61, lived a simple life as a long-haul truck driver in suburban Pennsylvania. The weathered lines on his face told stories of countless miles on America's highways, and the slight limp in his right leg reminded him of his service days. A former logistics specialist in the Marines, Jack had retired early after a minor accident on a supply road. The injury wasn't severe, but it was enough to push him towards civilian life, trading military convoys for commercial hauling. Every day followed the same rhythm: drive, return home, fix something old, and sip early morning coffee at the highway rest stop. His neighbors knew him as the quiet veteran who always had tools ready to lend, though few took the time to really know him. December brought an unexpected blizzard sweeping across the northern part of the state. Weather reports warned of record snowfall, but freight deadlines waited for no storm. Jack had promised a delivery to Maple Creek by morning, and promises mattered to him. As night fell, the snowfall intensified. Flakes the size of quarters hammered against his windshield, forcing Jack to slow to a crawl. By midnight, state troopers had closed the roads ahead. Stranded among a line of trucks, Jack pulled over, engine idling to keep the cabin warm. The CB radio crackled with voices of other drivers sharing updates. "There's an old man standing by the roadside for a while now, must be stranded," came a voice through the static. "Stay away from it," another driver growled. "Who's got time to rescue some fool lost in a storm?" Jack peered through his windshield. Indeed, a hunched figure stood in the snow, wearing only a thin jacket, barely moving. The temperature outside had dropped to 15 below zero. No one could survive that for long. He didn't hesitate. Despite warnings crackling through the radio, Jack pulled on his wool cap, zipped his heavy coat to his chin, and stepped out into the wind that slapped his face raw. Each step through knee-deep snow felt like wading through concrete. His bad leg protested, but Jack pushed forward, focusing on the motionless figure ahead. "Sir, are you all right?" Jack called out, his voice nearly swallowed by the howling wind. The man looked up, his face pale and lips turning blue. No response came, just a weak nod. "Come with me right now." Jack gripped the stranger's arm, supporting his weight as they trudged back toward the warm glow of the truck's cabin. Once inside, Jack wrapped the man in his emergency blanket, poured hot coffee from his thermos, and carefully closed all windows against the freezing draft. "Rest a bit," Jack said softly. "When morning comes, I'll find a way to help you get where you need to go." The man nodded gratefully, his eyes heavy with exhaustion as the warmth began to return the sensation to his frozen limb. Outside, the radio chatter continued, some drivers questioning Jack's decision to help, others falling silent. But in the soft glow of the dashboard lights, none of that mattered. What mattered was that someone wouldn't freeze to death tonight. "If you believe a good person doesn't need permission to do the right thing, stay with us." Throughout that long night, Jack kept the cabin heater running high, while he himself curled up uncomfortably in the driver's seat. The stranger slept deeply, occasionally waking with a cough that seemed to rattle his entire frame. Each time, Jack simply offered water, asking no questions. Years in the military had taught him that sometimes silence was the greatest courtesy you could offer someone in distress. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault, blanketing the highway in drifts that grew by the hour. The occasional sweep of headlights from passing snowplows cast eerie shadows across the cabin walls. By dawn, the snow had slowed, though a thin veil still filtered the morning light. The man stirred, sitting up straighter. Color returned to his face. He looked around, orienting himself, then studied Jack with clear, intelligent eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. His voice carried a natural authority, despite its hoarseness. Jack nodded. "Glad you're feeling better. I can try to help you get where you need to go, once the plow is clear enough road. Is there someone I should call for you? Family? Friends?" The man regarded Jack thoughtfully, then reached into his inner coat pocket. His hands, though still stiff with cold, moved with practiced precision. He withdrew a worn metal identification card, its surface scratched with age, but the lettering still visible. A DM, Nicholas T. Wexler, U.S. Navy. Jack stared at the card, momentarily stunned, 20 years of military service had conditioned certain reflexes in him. Though he didn't straighten to attention, his posture instinctively improved. "You're an admiral, sir." Admiral Wexler gave a slight nod, his expression remaining calm, as if being rescued by a truck driver in a blizzard was a perfectly ordinary occurrence. "I was on my way to attend a memorial service for an old comrade," he explained, his voice growing stronger. "My driver took ill suddenly in the last town. I thought I could manage the last 20 miles myself, but the storm came faster than predicted. GPS failed, then the rental car slid off somewhere back there." He gestured vaguely toward the window. "Been walking for about 2 hours before you stopped." Jack absorbed this information without comment. He'd seen enough in his life to know that rank rarely protected anyone from life's random cruelty. Weather, time, and death made no exceptions for Admiral Stars. "Any rank deserves respect, sir," Jack said quietly. "But I was just logistics corps in the Marines, not exactly someone who'd normally be giving aid to Navy brats." The Admiral's weathered face softened slightly. "And I was just a frozen old man on a highway last night, Corporal Ellison." "Jack Ellison, retired." Admiral Wexler nodded slowly. "Well, Corporal Ellison, I've learned that sometimes the most important chain of command is simply human being to human being." He glanced out the window at the gradually lightening sky. "I appreciate your discretion as well. Not all would recognize that sometimes an admiral might prefer not to call in the cavalry for a personal mistake." Jack poured another cup of coffee from his thermos, offering it to the Admiral. "I understand, sir. Nobody deserves to freeze to death on their way to honor someone who's fallen." The Admiral accepted the cup, wrapping his hands around its warmth. He studied Jack's face for a long moment, then placed a hand firmly on Jack's shoulder. "Thank you, and don't worry. I remember very clearly the name of the man who just saved my life." Something in the Admiral's tone, a certainty, a promise, hung in the air between them. The radio crackled to life, announcing that plows had cleared the main route ahead. Truckers were being allowed through in controlled groups. "I can get you to the police station in the next town," Jack offered. "They should be able to arrange transportation for you." Admiral Wexler nodded. "That would be appropriate. Thank you." As Jack started the engine and eased the big rig back onto the slowly clearing highway, neither man spoke much. Some experiences created their own kind of respect that required no conversation. The road ahead glittered with fresh snow in the morning light, and Jack drove carefully, conscious of his important passenger. In his rearview mirror, the night's desperate scene had vanished under pristine white drifts, as if it had never happened at all. Type believe if you've witnessed kindness delivered at the right time to the right person. Jack drove Admiral Wexler to the nearest police station as soon as the roads reopened. The small town officers seemed bewildered by the Admiral's presence, but quickly arranged a private room for him to make calls. The Admiral declined medical attention, despite Jack's concerns about possible hypothermia. "Navy men don't catch colds," he'd said with the ghost of a smile. Waving away Jack's worry, "I need to make contact with my security detail," was all he explained before disappearing into the station's office with the chief. Jack didn't wait around. He had a delivery to complete, already delayed by the storm. He simply nodded respectfully to the Admiral, received a firm handshake in return, and went on his way. By evening, Jack had delivered his freight, washed down his truck, and returned to his modest home in the suburbs of Millbrook. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. The encounter with the Admiral became just another story he never told anyone. Meanwhile, at the Eastern Naval Command Center, Admiral Wexler sat behind his desk, fingers steepled under his chin. Before him lay a thin folder, a service record for one Corporal Henry Jack Ellison, USMC, retired. "He didn't mention his service?" asked Commander Phillips, his aide. "Not a word," the Admiral replied, studying the photograph, clipped to the file. "Just pulled me from the storm and asked for nothing. Didn't even tell me he'd served." The aide nodded appreciatively. "Rare quality these days." "Indeed." Admiral Wexler tapped the folder thoughtfully. "His house needs work. Heating systems probably original to the 70s from the looks of it." "And did you see that porch, sir?" The Admiral looked up, a determined expression crossing his face. "Commander, I want you to assemble a team. Engineering, construction, electrical specialists. The best we have. May I ask the objective, sir?" Admiral Wexler smiled. "A special mission, one long overdue." 3 weeks passed. January brought clearer skies, but deeper cold. Jack spent his days off repairing his porch railing, damaged by years of Pennsylvania winters. The wood had rotted in places, and he meticulously replaced each section, painting as he went. On a Tuesday morning with frost still clinging to the grass, Jack was applying a fresh coat of white paint to the newly installed railings, when the sound of engines broke the neighborhood quiet. One vehicle, then two, then six military jeeps turned onto his street, all bearing Navy insignia. They moved with precision, forming an impressive line along the curb in front of his house. Neighbors peered from windows. Mrs. Donovan across the street didn't even pretend not to watch, stepping onto her front porch with a cup of coffee, staring openly. A young officer in full dress uniform stepped out of the lead vehicle, approached Jack's gate and called out, "Excuse me, is this the residence of Mr. Jack Ellison?" Jack set down his paintbrush, wiping hands on his old work jeans. "Yes, that's me." The officer straightened, his posture impeccable. "Sir, we've been dispatched on direct orders from Admiral Thomas Wexler. He has requested that we assist with repairs to your home's heating system, roof, and porch structure." Jack blinked, momentarily speechless. He glanced at the line of vehicles where more uniformed Navy personnel waited at attention. That's really not necessary. I just did what anyone would." The officer rendered a crisp salute. "Sir, with all due respect." Admiral Wexler was quite clear. His exact words were, "This man saved my life when he had no obligation to do so. The Navy takes care of its own, and anyone who helps one of ours becomes one of ours." Before Jack could protest further, the team was already unloading equipment. They moved with military efficiency, some examining his aging heating system, others assessing the roof from specialized equipment. A senior officer approached with a folder. "Mr. Ellison, we've reviewed your service record as well. Marine Corps Logistics. Honorable discharge following injury sustained in the line of duty." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Just a transport accident. Nothing heroic." 20 years of service speaks for itself, sir." Admiral Wexler also noted you didn't mention your service background when you helped him. He had to look it up himself. For 3 days, Jack's quiet home became a center of activity. Navy engineers replaced his failing heating system with a state-of-the-art unit. Roofing specialists reinforced and replaced damaged sections. Electricians upgraded his entire house to meet modern safety codes. Neighbors watched in amazement. Some approached cautiously, asking questions. For the first time in years, Jack found himself talking with people he'd lived beside but barely knew. Miss Donovan brought over a homemade apple pie on the second day. "Never knew we had a hero living across the street all these years," she said, handing him the still warm dessert. "I'm no hero, ma'am," Jack protested. "Just did my job like these fellas here." She gave him a knowing look. "That's exactly what my Harold used to say. He was at Incheon. Never thought himself special either." By the third day, a small crowd of neighborhood children had gathered to watch the Navy team at work. One boy, about 10, approached Jack with wide eyes. "Miss, are you like a secret agent or something?" Jack chuckled. "No, son, just an old truck driver who gave someone a ride. But they're fixing your whole house." Jack considered this for a moment, then knelt down to the boy's level. "Sometimes, Tommy, when you help someone without expecting anything back, the world has a funny way of helping you right back." The boy nodded seriously, as if receiving an important life lesson. Late that afternoon, the work team's leader, Commander Richardson, invited Jack to inspect the completed renovations. As they walked through the house, Jack could barely recognize his own home. The ancient furnace that had wheezed and groaned through countless winters had been replaced with an efficient system that hummed quietly. The roof no longer held patches upon patches. Even the electrical wiring, which had worried him for years but always seemed too expensive to replace, had been completely redone to modern standards. "It's too much," Jack said, emotion tightening his voice. Commander Richardson shook his head. "Admiral's orders, sir. And between us, he made it clear this was personal, not official Navy business. He wanted to be here himself, but there's a situation in the South China Sea requiring his attention." On the final day, as the team prepared to leave, the young officer who had first approached him presented a wooden plaque. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly handmade. Carved into its surface were the words, "Veterans Shelter, honored by honor itself." Admiral Wexler had this commissioned specially, the officer explained. He asked that it be placed somewhere visible. Jack ran his fingers over the carved letters, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. Tell him I'm grateful, but it wasn't necessary." The officer smiled. "He said you'd say exactly that." His response was, "Necessity has nothing to do with honor." Corporal Ellison. As the Navy vehicles departed, Mrs. Donovan crossed the street, curiosity finally overwhelming her reserve. "Jack Ellison," she said, hands on hip. "In 30 years as neighbors, You never once mentioned you knew admirals. Jack chuckled softly. I didn't. Not until 3 weeks ago. Slowly he explained the encounter during the blizzard. As he spoke, other neighbors gathered. Listen. For the first time many heard about his military service, his years on the road, his solitary life. You mean to tell me, Mr. Patel from 2 doors down interjected, you picked up a stranded man in a blizzard, without knowing who he was, and he turned out to be an admiral? Jack shrugged. Wouldn't have mattered if he'd been a janitor. Storm like that, you don't leave anyone outside. That evening after everyone had gone, Jack sat on his newly repaired porch. The house felt different somehow, not just because of the repairs but because for the first time in years, it felt less like a place he returned to and more like a home he belonged in. He carefully hung the wooden plaque beside his front door where morning light would catch its lettering. Type justice if you believe what's right will always be seen and repaid in the right way. From that day forward, Jack still drove his regular roads, delivered his cargo on time, and kept largely to himself, but something had shifted in the fabric of his quiet existence. It began with small gestures. A handwritten thank you note appeared in his mailbox from a veteran who had heard the story, then another, and another. One morning, he found a carefully folded American flag, placed on his doorstep, with a simple card that read, "From one who serves to one who remembers what service means." The local VFW hall, which Jack had never visited, despite numerous invitations over the years, suddenly had members greeting him by name. At the grocery store, the VFW commander personally stopped by to invite him to their monthly meeting. "We'd be honored to have you join us," the commander said simply. Jack accepted with a quiet nod. He didn't seek attention for what had happened. When asked, he would simply say, "Just help someone who needed it." Nothing special about that. But the story had taken on a life of its own, especially in veteran circles. It wasn't about the admiral's rank or the Navy's response. It was about the simple, unflinching decision to help when others had advised caution or indifference. The tale spread further than Jack realized. A reporter from the local paper called wanting to do a feature story. Jack politely declined. The County Veterans Affairs Office sent representatives to ask if he would speak at schools about service and citizenship. Again he declined. "I'm not good with speeches," he explained, "and the story's simple enough, without me telling it." What Jack didn't know was that Admiral Wexler had been watching from afar. Through discreet channels he monitored Jack's quiet dignity, his gentle refusals of recognition. In late February the Admiral made a call to an old friend at the Pentagon. By March an official letter arrived at Jack's home. He opened it with calloused hands, reading slowly, "In recognition of service, above and beyond the call of duty, both in uniform and as a civilian exemplifying the highest ideals of American citizenship." The letter invited him to Washington for a ceremony at which he would receive a civilian service medal. Jack sat with the letter for days, uncertain how to respond. Finally, he called the number provided. "I appreciate the honor," he told the aide who answered, "but I'd prefer not to make a fuss. Please thank the Admiral for me." 2 days later, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Corporal Ellison, this is Admiral Wexler." "Sir," Jack replied, automatically sitting straighter, though no one could see him. "I understand you've declined our invitation to Washington." "Yes, sir. I don't need recognition for doing what's right." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "You know, Ellison, in all my years of service, I've pinned medals on men who craved them and men who felt they didn't deserve them. But you're the first to make me reconsider the whole concept of recognition itself." Jack remained silent, unsure how to respond. "Would you permit me a compromise?" The Admiral continued. "No Washington, no cameras, no speeches, just a small ceremony at your local VFW, for the record, not for show." Something in the Admiral's tone, a genuine respect, moved Jack. "I could manage that, sir." Spring arrived, melting away winter's harsh grip. At the VFW's annual recognition ceremony, Jack sat uncomfortably in a pressed shirt, nursing a single beer, trying to blend into the background. The room fell suddenly quiet as a distinguished figure entered. Admiral Wexler, now in full dress uniform, adorned with ribbons and commendations, accompanied by 2 aides. The Admiral scanned the room, found Jack, and walked directly to him. Those nearby stepped respectfully aside. Jack started to rise, but the Admiral motioned for him to remain seated, and instead took the chair beside him. "Corporal Ellison," he said warmly, extending his hand, "I've been meaning to thank you properly." "No need for thanks, sir. You've done more than enough with the repair." Admiral Wexler shook his head. "That day I lost signal, lost direction, but you pulled me back from the cold.
Now I just wanted to make sure you'll always stay warm enough. A small smile crossed Jack's weathered face. I just stopped to help someone who needed it. Old soldier's reflex, I suppose. The admiral studied him thoughtfully. That night you told me you were just logistics. There's no just in any service, Corporal. The ones who move supplies, who ensure everything gets where it needs to go. They're the backbone. Without logistics, the fanciest battleship is just a metal island with hungry sailors. Jack chuckled softly at that. You know, the admiral continued, they tell me you haven't accepted any recognition for what you did. Don't need recognition for doing what's right, so Admiral Wexler nodded, understanding in his eyes. The best ones never do. Later, in a simple ceremony attended only by local veterans, Admiral Wexler presented Jack with a medal, not one recognized in official military records, but a special commendation created for the occasion. Its inscription read simply, "For reminding us what matters most." As conversations around them resumed, the two men sat in comfortable silence, separated by rank, but united by something more fundamental than military hierarchy, a shared understanding that beneath uniforms and titles, the most important duty was simply to one another. That evening, as Jack drove home, streetlights reflected off his truck's windshield. The road ahead stretched dark and empty, but unlike before, it no longer felt lonely. As Jack watched the jeeps disappear down the street, he realized something had shifted, not just in his home, but in his heart. In a world often too busy to notice quiet kindness, his moment of instinct had reminded others what honor truly looks like. He hadn't rescued a title or a rank, he had answered a human need, and the world had answered back. Sometimes the greatest rewards come not from what we receive, but from the quiet certainty that when the moment called, we answer. Have you ever helped someone without knowing who they were, only to discover that person had once helped an entire nation? Share a moment when you witnessed kindness being repaid in the right way. Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories, where the right actions, however small, are always remembered.